Nerdrotic.com.
Welcome, travelers, to the fringes of reality, where the strange and mysterious meet, and the thin veil between fact and fiction is torn. Welcome to the Forbidden Frontier.
We are early. Very early.
Very early. Because I forgot what time zone I was in and told Trigger the wrong time, who told Luke the wrong time, who told Adam the wrong time, but it's all my fault.
We got it fixed, though.
We fixed it. Luke will be here in a minute. He's I don't know.
Powdering his nose.
Putting powder up his nose. Yeah. You know, he was in Peru.
He's shining his jacket up, you know.
Yeah.
Putting the leather on there.
He's Peruvian marching powder his nose.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
I want to ask him about that. The Coca leaves, see if it helped him out at all. I didn't. It didn't really help me at all. I never felt anything.
You were doing coke down in Peru?
I didn't do it.
Coca leaves? Coca leaves?
The Coca leaves are everywhere.
Coca leaves.
Uh-huh.
But
And
yeah.
I want more details. What do you mean?
Did not help.
No, they're everywhere.
Help what?
They have them in little
Supposed
bowls
to help your energy
everywhere. They're supposed to help you in altitude. It helped a little, I guess.
They said that's how they built
Perk you up a little bit?
all the temples. That's how they built the temples. Was all of the.
It gave me a little burning sensation, you know, because you put them in like you're between your gum and
Oh,
your
like snooze?
Yeah.
They kind of
Stuck them in like chewing tobacco?
I think
ready, Luke?
I just didn't go hard enough. I needed to have a bunch.
You ready, Luke? You ready? Luke Caverns, ladies and gentlemen. What up, brother?
The man, the legend. Luke Caverns.
How are
the
you
true
guys
traveler.
How are you guys doing?
Well.
I'm gonna
How are
question
you?
right off the bat. Coca leaves. Yay, nay. Did they help you?
I never got elevation sickness when I was in Peru. So, and all I was doing was, you know, the reason that the cocoa leaves, the reason that they suggest them is because of the caffeine content, but it's like minimal content. So all I did was just consume copious amounts of Monster energy drinks while I was there, and I was totally fine.
Okay.
I think that the first,
free.
Yeah. I think the first day I was there, I got a little bit, you know, they told us to take it easy. And then I ended up in the situation where I needed to run to this bookstore to pick up some book that the Spanish chronicler had written. And so all of a sudden I was sprinting because I had 20 minutes to get from one side of Cusco to the other. And, you know, I went to bed with a little headache, woke up the next day and was fine for the next 2 weeks. So,
yeah, pretty similar.
Now, how was y'all's experience in Peru?
First day was rough, brother.
Really? Was it?
Like I didn't get sick,
Awesome.
but we went to Sacsayhuaman and climbing. Yeah. The part we entered from was from in town, so I climbed up a hill, right, and I was feeling it like a normal hill. That would have been completely. I walked from Cusco to Sacsayhuaman. It was like a mile, but it was a mile up, and it was like anywhere else you'd have been fine. I was
yeah, like instantly.
Yeah,
pretty bad.
Yeah. That was rough. So I did have to. There was a time when we were leaving with our group, and Dr. Barnhart calls me, and he's like, Luke, where are you at? And I had walked because I went off on my own to film some things, which never really works, you know, out. That's never a great thing to do when you have a whole group with you. But he calls me, and he's like, where are you at? I was at the entrance and he was at the exit. So I sprinted across to the exit so we could make it to our lunch. And by the time I was there, I was like, I'm going to throw up. I mean, the elevation just kicks your ass.
Yeah, it does.
So
it's rough. Great, though. It's wonderful. And I can't wait to hear about you've traveled a lot. in the last few months.
Yeah. It's been a whirlwind. I feel like I'm only just now really fully getting my energy back. I needed a good week and a half at home to lay down and do nothing to feel back at 100%.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't see one of those Indiana Jones map with the plane flying to the different locations,
Oh my God.
but it's you,
those
like,
are a
I'm
lot
going to be
harder.
disappointed.
I have tried to make those for my videos. Those are to animate. Those are not easy to do. You would think something like that would be easy, but it isn't.
No, it is.
I still want to see it. I'm just saying. I mean, I'm going to riot.
Yeah.
It has like a little big head of Luke, just like instead of the plane.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
That's a good
little
idea.
prop plane with just your head sticking out of it.
Like it's flying.
That's good. That's good. So we got Luke here. What's X-Ray Girl doing? She probably can't.
I think she's still traveling, right?
No, she was supposed to get in right when the show started at its normal time, so she'll be here later.
She'll be here later.
Yeah.
So
I saw her
Luke,
this morning.
You've been traveling. Give us a breakdown before we even get into any of the specifics. Just where you went because you've been all over the place.
Okay, so this year I've been to Mexico 5 times, and like every state south and southeast of Mexico City, and then I went to Peru for 11 days. And then I was home for about 4 days. I flew to Egypt for 21 days. And then when I left Egypt, I had 1 night at home. And then I was in Guatemala for 9 days or 10 days. That was quite a whirlwind. And I actually probably did it I probably should have done it all in the opposite order, because Peru is just a paradise the whole time that you're there. It's paradise. The weather is absolutely wonderful. Egypt is a paradise. The weather is absolutely wonderful while you're there, but you're walking around in the hot sun a lot. And Guatemala is an absolute pit of hell in the jungle. And I probably should have done it all in the opposite. I should have done Guatemala first and ended in Peru. But instead I did it all at the end. And dude, I was so sick at the end of Guatemala. There are these horrible mosquitoes that are out there, and I think my arms are, you probably can't tell anymore. You probably can't tell, but if you look at it in person, I think my arms are permanently scarred from bug bites. You probably can't really tell.
I can see a couple bites
there's like deep bruises under my skin now. Yeah, I probably have sustained like tens of thousands of bites this year. But something, one of those bugs bit me so bad. I don't know what it was. I got really, really sick, and I was almost deaf in both ears.
What?
For the last like 4 days of the time that I was in Guatemala. And dude, I couldn't hear anything to save my life. And I'm having to lead everybody through, through the jungle every single day. And I mean, you were just sweating and sweating and sweating. It's like standing in a sauna from the time you leave your hotel room to the time that you go to bed every day. Like the whole day, you're like, I can't wait to get in my hotel room and get in the AC and go back to bed. So anyways, aside from the negative aspects, I saw so much, learned so much, spent a lot of good time with a lot of great people, and really came away with the overwhelming sense that while I love the vastness of Mesoamerican civilization and how much is still buried under the jungles, and while I loved how absolutely beautiful and mystical and otherworldly South America was, I mean, just the terrain of South America and the animals that are there, it's like completely foreign to anything that we see. The scale of Egypt, you can take one site in Egypt and hold it up against anything else in the rest of the world, and it will dwarf all of it. There isn't anything on the entire planet that comes close to the size and scale and monumentality of Egypt. And how legendary it is. I guess if it just it's so iconic. I came away with the overwhelming sense that Egypt it's so interesting. It is the beginning of civilization as we recognize it, and is never really surpassed in all of the thousands of years later. So it's really been an amazing like last 45 days or so.
I was watching your video on Egypt. All of those tunnels, like you were saying, they're just everywhere. There's just random, just 40 feet deep tunnels, just pockmarked the entire landscape.
Yeah. So that was at Giza, and when you study things without actually visiting them, you don't. I mean, your perception can't be accurate. There are people who, like me, obsess over Egypt every day, even though you haven't been there. Your perspective of it will become much more accurate when you go. And what I mean by that was I didn't realize the density around the Giza Plateau. It's not just the pyramids there, which, I mean, everybody knows that, but you really know it when you're there. That there is just this entire sprawling network of structures and tunnels and shafts that just fall off into nowhere. I was out there with my friend Jeffrey Drum from Land of Kim. I don't know if you guys have talked to him.
I know that channel though.
Yeah, he's
YouTube.
He's a really interesting dude, and he lives in Egypt with his wife, and and they took me around Giza and Dashur. And whenever we were walking around, he's like, Luke, watch where you step. Watch where you step. There's holes everywhere. And at first I'm like, okay, I'll be fine. And I was fine, but he wasn't kidding that you can walk over to some dusty corner of Giza, far away from any of the guards or any of the people or anything, and there will be an unguarded shaft, like dozens of them. I look down at the bottom and there's just no bottom. It's just descending down into the ground, and you get a flashlight, and it's just this shaft that goes down, I don't even know, 40, 50 feet into the bedrock, and it'll have these tunnels that lead off to the sides, and it is all over the Giza Plateau. And the Giza Plateau is so vast. Yeah, there's one of them. The Giza Plateau is so vast that Flinders Petrie, I was in this video that I put out a couple days ago. Flinders Petrie discovered 2 mastabas, one that he dated to the first dynasty, one that he dated to the second dynasty. And he documented those in the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s. And nobody knows where those mastabas are today. They have disappeared in just the last 120 years. So you can just imagine, as I'm standing on the causeway leading down to Menkaura's Valley Temple, and I'm looking off into the southern desert, which is all unexcavated. Like, if you take a tour to Egypt, before you get to Giza, they drive you around the southern desert. There's this big wall where they've basically walled it all off till they don't allow any construction or anything. And when you drive around it, that's where you get that photo of the desert leading all the way up to the pyramids. That still exists today, and that's called the Southern Desert. And that entire southern desert has structures lining all of it all the way up to the pyramids. But it's just, it's all been covered up by the desert. And I mean, that's just Giza, dude. That's just Giza.
Yeah.
The Giza Plateau alone dwarfs everything else that I've ever seen. All of it. There's nothing else that even compares to the Giza Plateau. And that's not including, that's aside from Dashur, Abu Sir, Saqqara, Luxor, Aswan. I mean, just all these other sites in Egypt. The scale of it, there is no competitor in the ancient world.
You went to all these places? You were there for 21 days, you said?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Some of them I went to twice. And
that's awesome.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah. And it's what's really weird is before I went, I was thinking, I'm going to go to the Great Pyramid and I'm going to go stand in the King's Chamber that I have been thinking about for, since I was sentient. And then now I'm sitting here and I'm like, and now I'm all the way back home in Texas. It's just so weird, right? So I went into the King's Chamber, and Land of Kim, he nudges the guard and he hands the guard like a 20, and he goes, okay, come here. And so he takes me over to the sarcophagus that's in the King's Chamber, and he's like, get in. And I go, what? And he goes, get in. And so I jumped in, I laid down on the inside like a mummy. And then Land of Kim, he does the thing, and the sarcophagus is like reverberating inside of it. And it was, I don't know, it was really interesting. And so, cool. I laid down inside the box in the King's Chamber, and that was really, really cool.
I was gonna say you look like a couple years younger.
So. Yeah. Yeah,
Like, huh?
Energetic.
I may have de-aged a little bit.
Yeah.
Not on your arms though. You got a bunch of
No.
like red splotches.
Gotta work on
there.
the healing for that. Maybe
I
go
don't know
back.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
should have done it the other way. See, I mean, oh,
How
I
was the
probably should have done all of it the other way
Yeah,
and then rejuvenated in the King's Chamber.
right.
Yeah,
what saved you?
yeah. You know, it was really special. When I arrived in Egypt, it took me like 28 hours or something to get there, just because one of my flights from Istanbul kept getting delayed. Which sucks, man. I'm so glad I don't have travel days for a little bit. And so I land in Cairo, and my poor driver had been waiting on me for 6 hours. And I gave him a really good tip, and he was thankful, and he drove me like an hour to my hotel. And so I've got to be up at 6 a.m. to meet Land of Kim at Giza, and it's now 3:30, and I've made it to my hotel room. And so I'm starting off Egypt the next 21 days like this. And so I go to the but I got my hotel right across the street from the Giza Plateau, so I was able to walk there. And I knew that there was a rooftop restaurant, so I walked the staircase up to the rooftop, and I go out there, and I'm looking on the horizon for the Great Pyramids. Like I can see the new Grand Egyptian Museum that they built, which opened like the day after I arrived, and I didn't even know that. They had a soft opening. I was able to just walk in, and
cool.
that was amazing. But I'm standing on the rooftop of this hotel, and I'm looking out, and I can't see the pyramids, and I go, oh. And I look up, and that in the skyline was the pyramids. And dude, I just like the child in me just broke down crying. I was so overwhelmed. And I was just thinking, I don't know if it was just I was relieved to be done with that long travel day. Probably not that. I was just so happy to finally be there. I had just had anticipated it for so long, and it was nice to see the pyramids for the first time alone, if that makes sense. I think I was able to really process how I felt about it. And so I'm sitting up there just like weeping. I don't think I've cried since like literally I haven't cried since maybe 2019 or something. And so it's all coming out. And then I feel this tap on my back, and this young Egyptian boy that's like a waiter working at 4 o'clock in the morning. He hands me a box of tissues. I'm like, oh, this is very embarrassing.
He's like, yeah, it happens a lot around here.
It happens all the time.
There you go.
Yeah, he had them ready to go. So I got up the next morning and had like an 8 or 9 hour day at Giza, and it was absolutely just amazing. But my clothes will never recover from the sand and the staining and everything, but it's fine. But yeah, I had a really an amazing time, and I'm very fortunate and very excited to go back in like I think a month from now or a month or two from now. I'm
really?
going back I'll be back the entire month of January. I think I'll be there.
Whoa.
That's killer, dude. Are you you have like your videos planned out what you're gonna cover while you're there?
Well, I think I'm going to take about 5 days to film some things in northern Egypt. So for everyone watching, the pyramids, you're only going to find them in northern Egypt, which to the Egyptians is lower Egypt because the Nile runs north. So they're at the low end of the river. And it was just a northern Egyptian or a lower Egyptian thing to build pyramids. For whatever reason, the people building, megaliths in the south weren't building pyramids. I don't know why. Probably going to be spending some time in northern Egypt and filming content around the pyramids. I think that, I have interest in other places, but I think that's where I'm going to start. And it's just more accessible. I mean, traveling to southern, people don't realize Egypt is absolutely gigantic. Even though everything exists along the Nile, it's a 15-hour freight train ride from Cairo to southern Egypt, where Aswan is. So I mean, Egypt is gigantic. So it's just more accessible to hang out around Cairo and film the pyramids. But yes, long story short, so I'm doing a 15-day tour with NEXT, his company Adept Expeditions. We're doing a tour, and then probably for about 5 days after that, I think Johanna, James, and I are going to link up in Cairo and go around and film some things, maybe with Land of Kim. I'm not sure. He lives in Cairo. So yeah, I'm planning some stuff out, but there's so much to wrap my head around. I saw so much, and the areas of expertise that the various people you travel with have is just mind-boggling. And it's tough to pick, it's kind of you kind of get cut both ways when you're a YouTuber, because you should pick something that's unique. I shouldn't just start studying the exact same things that other people have. So you should pick something that's unique, that you want to look into and bring to your audience, but also something that you actually find interesting. And so I'm kind of letting it take its natural course for what I'm going to film. I know that that's a non-answer to your question.
No, that's pretty normal. I think you let the work speak for itself. So
when we went to Peru, it was hard to do videos because we were so interested in the sites themselves, and we wanted to just kind of soak up as much as we could. And then we came back around at the end of the trip and did more video stuff at Sexy Woman. But the first few days were just us just absorbing it.
Yeah, like collecting footage, especially on a tour. Luke, I mean, you got your own stuff, but I know Michael gave us a Dropbox. It's going to take me a month to collect footage.
Yeah.
And it's going to take me 6 months to do a video that might be half an hour long of stuff that pretty much people have normally seen. I think we saw one part that not a lot of people see.
Really? At what site, if you want to say?
We were at, it was Temple of the Moon and Temple of the Monkey. Now, you've probably seen it, and all the people in this scene have seen it, but it's a mile off the beaten path by Saxy Waman, and not a lot of people have done a lot of video up there. And we went climbing around. There's a lot of crazy shit up there.
Okay. So
I haven't seen.
Temple of the Moon at Cusco.
Cusco, yeah, Cusco. So, and it was a lot of that stuff was crazy, absolutely crazy. But and it'll be fun going through footage. But you're cutting documentaries at this point, like long documentaries, and it's gonna be hard to get those into 10-minute segments.
Yeah, it's not easy at all. And then you have so much to write and say about it. It's not just obviously studying ancient history and archaeology and presenting something on it isn't easy. There's so much more than just filming it. There's a lot to process in your own mind, and you start realizing that as you're sitting down to write out the video, you're like, whoa, there's a lot more I need to know about this. I'm excited to hear about or to relay our experiences with Peru as well. I feel like there's a lot of us in this little scene that traveled to Peru in the last few months. I know Wandering Wolf, he's down there right now, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, before we get into your stuff, do you want to pull that up, Garrett?
Yeah, let me find that.
Oh, you knew about this, Luke.
Yes.
And he knew about this because we were walking around.
We can talk about it now?
We did the San Antonio museum thing, and you guys showed me the picture. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And he found it. It's kind of off the beaten path. And you know more about it than I do. He just showed it to me. And this is what we've been kind of teasing on the program, that like this discovery out there. I called it, it's very Baalbek like. That's how you described it to me, Luke. You're like, there's this giant cut stone in the middle of freaking nowhere in Peru, and there he is standing on it. And there's
more than one.
Yeah, there's more than one.
You know what my hunch is I talked about this. I really went in deep on this subject on Matt Bell's podcast like a year ago. And I think, just my hunch, is that megalithic architecture in South America, its origins will be found in the Amazon. The reason that I think that is you have Coral Supe culture more than 5,000 years ago. They're getting destroyed by these tropical storms called El Niños and La Niñas. And they just keep on, hitting this Coral Supe culture. And they build like 15 different pyramids in this coastal desert of Peru before they decide to flee up into the mountains. So the same culture, we can see it starts out as pre-pottery, but we can follow their bodies and their genetic signal as it goes from the coast of Peru, and they're eventually like, you know what, we can't be living on this damn ocean anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to the mountains. So they go up to the mountains, and all of a sudden they develop pottery. They didn't just invent pottery, it was introduced to them from people living in the Amazon. And then their architecture changes too. and they finally get a pantheon of gods, and they start acknowledging this fanged deity god. The people that were living on the coast of Peru didn't know anything about, well, I mean, they probably did from traders, but they wouldn't have revered a jaguar, right? But now they're living at Chavin de Hontar, where the Andes slopes down into the Peruvian Amazon, and they run into people from the Amazon. Now, all of a sudden, rather than building their pyramids out of these small, they're basically these sacks of rubble, how we have like sacks of concrete and people, build things out of that. Or imagine if you were going to build a building out of just bags of concrete, like you lay the bags down and you don't actually make concrete with it. They're basically doing that with rubble. Now, all of a sudden, they have adopted Amazonian pottery with Amazonian painting. They've adopted an Amazonian pantheon. They're worshiping animals, half human, animal deities from the Amazon, and they're building megalithic architecture with interiors on the inside. And that city is called Chavin de Hontar. And so I have always thought, well, it's obvious that they were influenced by something that was further off into the Amazon, because the Amazon it's as far as we know, is, well, obviously it's one of, but I think it is the oldest place in the Americas. We have evidence of habitation and campfires in there going back to like 30,000 BC. And so I think that there's a civilization that flourished in these, pockets of man-made gardens with these gigantic civilizations. And, I'm sure that they've done an adequate amount of survey work around what Wandering Wolf just found. And there's probably not a city there, but that doesn't mean that he's not standing on a quarry right now where a block is taken from there and they're taken off somewhere into the Amazon. Because this is the northwestern Amazon, in Peru. And so, who knows in that vicinity where blocks like that are quarried, cut, and, drug off somewhere. So it's pretty interesting. It looks like to me that there's a megalithic quarry found in the northwest.
Do you think it's the same civilization that in Ancient Apocalypse Season 2, they were doing that LiDAR and finding those roads everywhere in the Amazon? I don't know if it was in Peru. Was it in Peru? I don't remember exactly where.
Yeah. So you have these gigantic roads in the Amazon. They're highways, right? There's no way that that's natural. Those have to be cut stones. But I wonder what stone it is. Is that limestone? Because to me, it looks an awful lot like marble, but I don't think that's what it is. But the Amazon is strange. It has these white stones, like at Chavin de Hontar. All of their pillars are made out of these big, beautiful white stones. I mean, that right there looks like when you're at Machu Picchu and you see the granite outcropping quarries that are right next to the megalithic temple of the moon. That's what that looks like. It looks like people are in there chopping that stuff up and pulling it out. Now, is this part of that same civilization? Well, I mean, it's Amazonian civilization, but we don't really know if
the timeline.
I mean, we have different tribes. Like you have the Xingu people that live along the Xingu River. Those are probably the people that killed Percy Fawcett. That's where the Xingu people, the Xingu River, Teddy Roosevelt was down there. Percy Fawcett was down there. And so were the rubber mining companies that were enslaving all of these natives. Yeah. That was a huge, dense pocket of people that had survived, the 400 years of contact previous. However, you got to think. So when you're asking about that, I'm giving you a long-winded answer of is it the same civilization?
That's fine.
So in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and he landed in the Bahamas. Shortly after that, in the very late 1490s and the early 1500s, you have Spanish traders sailing from Hispaniola. And they're kind of just poking around on the Yucatan Peninsula. They're interacting with these late period Maya people and trading with them and, probably, hanging around with the women. And they are infecting, not realizing that they are spreading disease from Asia and Africa that's come through Europe. And now they're in the Americas and they're giving all these people these diseases, unbeknownst to them at the time. So, as contact goes on, the Spanish are not really interested in the Maya because the Maya have they're long past their peak, and the Aztecs are plotting to take over everything in Mesoamerica. So the Aztecs are who the Spanish see as being interesting. The Aztecs also have gold, which is interesting because they weren't mining the gold in Mexico. They were getting it from somewhere else. So the Spanish, they march all the way to Tenochtitlan. By 1523, they've conquered the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, and they go, where is this gold? Where is this gold coming from? They say it's coming off of the coast. And so they follow the coast. And so Cortez sends his nephew, or one of his descendants, Pizarro, on an expedition off the coast of Mexico to go down to South America. Well, when he arrives in South America, and he meets the Inca prince Atahualpa, the prince's father, who was the late emperor, had died from disease that had reached there. Now, this is 1536, so you got to think contact is 1492. By 1536 or 1532, it's one of those dates, that disease has spread down Mesoamerica, Central America, South America, crawled through the Amazon, and that disease jumped ahead of the Spaniards and had already reached the Inca realm by the time the Spaniards got there, and the emperor had died from Spanish disease. At the same time, that Spanish disease is sweeping across the Amazon. And so when Native Americans, when they got sick, they thought that a spirit was attacking you. And so what they would do is they would all flee to the local, doctor, or the, their local hospital that they would have. Like Tenochtitlan had hospitals. And we can only assume that in the Amazon, and we know in the Inca realm they did as well. So they're all fleeing to the city centers where they're all infecting each other and not realizing it. So in the Amazon, the people that are being affected the most are the cities with the highest or the places with the highest concentration of peoples, which would be the most advanced cities, right? And all of the Amazonian people that survive today, the vast majority, are the descendants of the people who lived on the peripheral of the Amazon that were the most savage, and they were probably outcasts in their own day, if that makes sense. So all of these core civilizations, the civilization that's probably coring away these huge stones, all of that was eradicated. Any of those direct descendants living in whatever city those were taken to, if they were even still living there, but let's say they were, would have been completely eradicated by disease. So, you have Amazonian civilization, but you have to think the Amazon is the same size as the US. So is that all one civilization? Were there multiple? The Maya world wasn't united. Each and every city was its own city-state, its own civilization, essentially, with its own dynastic kings. That's kind of what makes Egypt so easy to study, because Egyptian history is very similar to its geography. It's straight up and down. It's just like the Nile. It's straight up and down from the first pharaoh to the last pharaoh. Egyptian history is pretty simple. There's some outliers, there's some mysteries there, but I just mean the general history is easy to understand. The Maya world is not like that at all. And I'm kind of jumping around places, but we were talking about the Amazon, the Maya world, Central America, Mesoamerica, Mexico. If the Amazon is anything like the Maya world is all these different cities that each have their own lineages and dynastic families and history, and all interact with each other.
It's like Europe. It's kind of in that sense, where there's a bunch of different kingdoms.
Really, I attribute it more to Greece, because you have in Europe, you have a long-standing history, basically an entire history of kingdoms, right? But in the Maya world, they don't start out as kingdoms. They start out as, I guess, these divine senates, or these divine councils that rule over the people, and the gods are put at the precipice, and then dynastic families take over. And then you have the classic period where it's kingdoms. And then the kingdom period, basically, which we call the classic period, falls apart. And then they go back to these divine councils worshiping, or these divine councils of priests worshiping the gods that rule over the people. So if the Amazon is anything like that, then it's probably very, very complicated. And there were probably multiple civilizations living in the Amazon at all periods of time. There's probably a precedence for that, because in the Amazon, even today, they will they will steal each other's women, and they will plot to the local tribes will plot to assassinate each other. They'll plot to steal each other's women, or rather than
always the women,
rather than going to war with each other, they will all agree to trade wives. I don't know why that.
Wife swapping.
It's a wife
swapping.
And that's how the disease got ahead of the Spanish.
That's probably how the disease got ahead of the Spanish. So, anyways, yeah, that's probably it's definitely a remnant of an ancient civilization in the Amazon. Whether it's the same civilization that's building those huge highways, I would say it probably just wasn't one civilization building those highways. They probably all did it. Now, those highways are actually, some of them are these raised, huge, long causeways that go through the jungle that people would walk across. But because maybe 40 or 50% of the Amazon is this marshy swamp, what they did was they would, rather than build a causeway up like this, so basically here's this ditch where my elbows are at, and you have this road that you're walking on up here that's elevated from the flooding and everything. They actually go the opposite way. They build a singular ditch and they sail through the Amazon. They have the little boats, and they'll go up and down these canals.
That's awesome.
Sail from city to city to city. And basically, what the archaeological evidence shows us. Now, this is just on the peripherals of the Amazon. I mean, we don't really have any survey in the center of the Amazon. These are just the peripheral people that survived into later antiquity, or I should say, survived beyond contact. Essentially, what the archaeological evidence shows us is that these people, they were violent cultures, that obviously had war, but most of the time they were farming in these, small spots of man-made gardens. Like the entire Amazon isn't a man-made garden, but what happens is you'll be walking through this dense, inhospitable jungle, and then you hit this tropical place that's growing with all the fruits and vegetables that you need to survive. And those are man-made gardens that grow in the Amazon. And the indigenous people that live there today, they go looking for these pockets, and then they live there for 10 years and go find another one. But what the archaeological evidence shows us today is that these people that are building these huge geometric shapes in the Amazon with these long causeways that they're sailing from city to city, I'm sure you guys have seen the ones with the circle that's being squared, and they're aligned. They have, astronomical alignments. This is basically what the evidence shows us. This is what their civilization was. They were farming these man-made gardens. They were going out and hunting animals. They were incredible astronomers at night. And the people who weren't astronomers were getting in the little boats and going up and down these causeways and going from party to party to party to party throughout the Amazon, because we find all these pottery shards with these old snacks and like their, what their equivalent to wine or beer would be. And so these people are just partying it up in the Amazon for thousands of years.
It's a pub crawl through the
that's basically, that's basically what it is. Yeah. So it's hard science and hard partying, and it's funny, that's what so many civilizations are throughout the ancient world. You have people who are just, obviously people living in the civilization that have incredible minds that are documenting incredible things, and everybody else is either going to war, hunting, having sex, and partying. That's it.
So much
nothing has changed.
We're all the same.
Yeah, thousands of years later, what are we doing still?
Yeah, so it's really, really cool.
It is. That's crazy. And we've got so much to cover here. We really do. But yeah, Michael finding that, he's going to do a video on it. He texted me last night. He's all, dude, and he shot me a picture. That was rad to see. That was great to see.
Yeah. I'm glad that he got out there. It's really cool. I think that's one of the more pressing, newer things that have arrived. Like that was just recently discovered, and he's gone out there and kind of projected it to a popular audience. Yeah. And I don't even know. I mean, that happens once every few decades, probably.
Yeah, I liked your tweet. People said the age of discovery was over. Yep. It's far from over. You were talking about the sands of Egypt. Your personal kind of thing is going out in the jungles, in South America and finding new stuff. And there's Siberia still. There's so many places to check out.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're not even close. And just going to the basic places again, just experiencing stuff that I've seen all, everybody within this scene like go to, 100 times or whatever, but seeing it for yourself absolutely does change your perspective. Like you said about Egypt, when we got to Sacsayhuaman, I was like, holy shit. Like like no picture did it justice at all.
No.
And you think like maybe it'll make more sense when I get there and I could touch it and I could see it, and it makes less sense. You go like, how the rocks are so monumentally huge. Like, how were they able to do this? It's really baffling. And you brought up a good point. Like, if you've never been to the site, you can never really know it. Like, you could watch all the stuff about Peru and see all the information, but like once you're there, you can see, obviously it's real life, but you're seeing every detail and everything that's leading up to those monumental sites. Wait, we were talking about Sacsayhuaman. We were looking at Sacsayhuaman, and then on the other side of that hill, there's this amazing structure, this natural forming rock and cutouts and all this stuff that's right there that barely gets any. I was looking like all over the internet.
We spent a lot of time on that over there too.
We spent a ton of time trying to find has anybody studied this area? What is this? And there's like barely any information about it because everything is Sacsayhuaman. But it's great going to these sites and seeing it for yourself because there's so much stuff that you miss not doing that.
Yeah, there really, really is. I feel like I've been saying that a lot the last month and a half, just in various conversations I've had with people. Everywhere that I go doesn't answer a lot for me. It just gives me a new perspective and creates way more questions.
Yeah.
Nothing was, I was really excited for that round of going to see Egypt and Peru. Those were two big monumental ones with, a lot of long-standing big question marks that people have been talking about for a long time, and I was excited to get there, and I kind of knew that just seeing it wasn't going to answer things for me, but it was going to create more questions, and that was exactly right. It created so many more questions that it did answers, and widened my perspective as to, I think before you go to Peru, you know that there's this temple, I'm talking about the palace of Inca Rocco with the 12-sided stones. That there's this temple somewhere in Peru that has this crazy 12-sided or 12-angled stone, and that somewhere in the middle of the city of Cusco there's this big palace with these huge stones, and somewhere around there's this place called Sacsayhuaman, but then there's Machu Picchu, which is a few hours away. But once you're there, you actually realize that the entire modern day city of Cusco is just a reskin of the ancient city. That entire city is the ancient city. Every single road you're walking down, every single building, at least the lowest floor, is the ancient city. I'm sure you guys saw the KFC that's made out of megalithic stones. And McDonald's that's next to it, and there's a Patagonia there.
Yeah, there's like a Starbucks and all kinds of places. It is amazing seeing the streets that go from ancient to modern, and it's all right there in front of you. You get every single era of Cusco is like right there in each building. It's
I'm
really
working
amazing.
on a video right now that's called was it ancient, something like ancient architecture in modern Peru. It's gonna be, that's a boring name, but it'll be something more than that. But it's me walking throughout the city, and I documented every single building that I could find where the interior was actually the ancient city, and it was absolutely overwhelming. Okay, did you guys see? If you go downtown, like that main plaza, and I don't know, there's one of the side streets that's next to the main church, and if you keep walking down there are more walls with these huge stones, but there's these gigantic gateways that are 12, 15 feet in the air with this lintel block that's as big as some of the stuff that you see in the Valley Temple in Egypt. And there were several of these. I put them in a lecture that I actually did last night with the Snake Brothers. But they are just these huge gateways that I think one of them was like a modern art museum. But the ancient city is still there, and only God knows how old some of that architecture must be. And it really takes getting out there and seeing it, because you're just not going to find photos of these random obscure buildings with all these gigantic stones in them.
No, and that's the stuff you see when you go there. Is you go off the beaten path and you're like, oh, well, there's a keystone cut. That's weird. And there's some random, like, God, in Peru, and I'm sure it's way worse in Egypt. Like everywhere, there's the terraces, right? But like randomly on mountains, you'll see a wall. You'll see part of a wall, a polygonal wall that just goes into the dirt. That was just, and like, what was that a wall for? Was it a retaining wall? What the hell is it even doing there? Nobody can even get up there. So much of it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, the terracing, my God, was that not incredible when you guys? So that drive
blew
from Cusco,
my fucking mind.
That drive from Cusco to Ollantaytambo, you look off to the, I think it's the northern face of the mountainside, and the terracing is from the bottom of the valley to the top of the mountain. Every single mountain from Cusco. And what is that drive? Is it an hour and a half? Is it 3 hours?
It's like 2 hours or something like that.
2 hours. It's one continuous mountain range lined from the bottom to the top with terracing. I mean, I was pretty blown away by that.
That blew me away at the same level as like Machu Picchu, and like the amount of terracing was insane. It's just everywhere you looked.
It's everywhere you look. It is, and it's like it's in between like sheer cliffs. Like there's like a little slope between a sheer cliff, and they're like, we're going to terrace here too. You know, and
amazing.
Like, and it's we're talking heights of 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet, not like 1,000 feet.
Yeah, and you weren't worth a damn as an ancient Peruvian if you had a fear of heights. You weren't worth it. You know, to those people. Did you guys go up Huayna Picchu, the mountains on the backside of Machu Picchu? Did y'all go up that?
No. What was
X-Ray did.
X-Ray Girl did.
Yeah, and
right?
so could you guys see the structures
Montana.
that are up there on top of the mountain that sits behind Machu Picchu? There's more structures up there, and there's terracing up there. You know, it's just this sheer 5,000 foot drop with these little staircases going up and down the terracing from there. I mean, golly, man!
Yeah,
with all that rain
insane.
there, I'm sure that there's a lot of dead bones of poor ancient Peruvians at the bottom of these mountains. I'm sure
cocaine will make you do crazy things, and it's a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
But
sorry. I'll
go
say real quick is all that terracing that's in the Sacred Valley. You know, there's really no telling how long that those terraces were used for. We know that they were even in use when the Spaniards arrived. And basically what the Inca told them and the way that the Inca were able to, they were probably the most well-run empire in all of human history. And the way that they were able to conquer other civilizations is they would show up and they would go, you're now going, you know, we're the kingdom of Cusco, basically. You are now going to officially, in an official sense, you're going to speak our language. And I am going to build you a palace and give you all the food and everything you want in the city of Cusco, which is, you know, probably you walk around that city, you get the sense this is probably the most impressive ancient city in all of the Americas that ever was built. I would say so. Greatest weather, you know, certainly the best weather. And I'm going to build you a palace in Cusco. And what do you guys need? Do y'all need some, you know, do you guys need food? Do you need defensive walls? Need something like that? Okay. And 2 days later, 20,000 people show up with these huge baskets of food, and they come in and just fatten up this new place that they've conquered. But really all they want them to do is pay them back tax. But what they do is they would take away this civilization's ability to make its own agriculture, and they had to rely on the Sacred Valley to feed them. So that Sacred Valley, those farms along from the bottom to the top of every single mountain across the entire Sacred Valley. You know how there were like mountain ranges that would go off and beyond away? That all of those too were all being farmed as well. I mean, millions and millions and millions of people are out there farming every single day, you know, all year long. And that valley fed all of ancient Peru Ecuador, maybe a little bit of Colombia, and bleeding into the Amazon. That's why there's that much terracing there. And, we have no idea how long that terracing was all in place for, but that's why it exists. That's the evidence that we have. So, they were probably using that to their advantage for a very long time. And probably those terracing farms are what gave ancient Peruvians, however far in the distant past, the power to be able to make things like Sacsayhuaman, Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, Pisac, and Cusco.
Because it's a calorie deficit, right? Like you're a calorie number. That's like that. What's that? What does it take to build these massive monuments? It takes calories. That means you have to have enough people that can be fed well enough to do all this stuff.
Yep.
And it makes so much sense at that scale of farming agriculture. There, Marcia, our tour guide, was talking about the terracing and explaining how it was like a laboratory. They were using it as a way to determine where the best crops could grow at what altitude,
what elevation.
But like that's why they were doing it all the way up as well, because they were like, okay, well these types of potatoes grow great at this elevation and that elevation. And it's just
she specifically said the cocoa leaf. She's like, we want to know how high we can farm the cocoa leaf.
Yes.
And like, hey, it's motivation.
Maybe they were just supplying the world with
maybe.
cocoa leaves back
Well,
then.
there is the rumors out there of cocaine being found in sarcophagi or in the bodies.
Yeah,
of
Egyptians. I think I am probably the person that needs to go track that down and see what the reality of that is, because I keep hearing that, and I
keep hearing it too.
I keep hearing it.
Give it a sniff.
Yeah,
I keep hearing that, and I mostly ignore it. Not because I don't believe it, but just because I know, oh man, this is going to be a rabbit hole to go down. I'm going to have to commit a full day to this. So now that I have been to Peru and Egypt, it's probably time to see if that's a real statement. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, now here's the thing. If it's found in a Egyptian sarcophagus, it's different than the traces of cocaine being found
in a body,
in a mummy. So what that would mean is that we would have to have a, you can carbon date a body, exactly when those people lived. Or let's say you can put it within a century. So let's say that body is 1300 BC, the better half of the New Kingdom, or the middle part of the New Kingdom in Egypt, like the height of the Egyptian Empire. I guess like biblical Egypt, the time of Exodus. So we would need to take a look at what's going on in South America. Well, Shavin de Hantar is starting to kick off at this point. Corral Supe culture has already been around for a little while. We know that.
What was that? What did you just mention that just started kicking off?
So Shavin de Hantar.
What's that?
It's the civilization I was talking about earlier, that they are the first Peruvians that interact with Amazonians.
Okay.
And so they're the first civilization that we recognize of the Andes. So they are the predecessors by 3,000 years before the Inca, or I guess I should say before the demise of the Inca. The Shavin de Hantar was around 3,000 years before that. And Shavin de Hantar is who they say is also the predecessor to Tiwanaku as well. Of course, that's a controversial statement, but we'd have to look about 3,000 or 1300 BC and what's going on in South America, and there's some things going on out there. Now, how would cocaine actually get to Egypt? Boy, you have a lot between South America and Egypt. You have all of Africa, and then you would have, if you went the other way, you would have the entire Pacific Ocean and all of of Indonesia and Southeast Asia, where we would need to be looking for cocaine as well. Not that it's impossible, but probably what would happen is that, you would have people who are trading back and forth. And it's probably not that South Americans actually knew Egyptians, but that, a trace of cocaine or somebody is selling blow, and it's somehow making its way all the way to Egypt. How it actually would get to Egypt, I don't know. So I'm interested in looking into this. And if it's real, and if cocaine really is found in there, man, that's certainly something to start like really looking into.
Yeah, I mean, if somehow the Peruvians and the Egyptians were trading
Mhm.
3,500 years ago, the rumor of the cave found in the Grand Canyon that had the Egyptian hieroglyphs, like it like adds a little bit of credence to
Mhm.
that. I mean, it pops in my head. I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. Imagine. I don't know,
Sure. Yeah.
throw that out there.
Yeah. I think that civilizations connected to each other and traveling long distances certainly goes back, and I think that's obvious to us watching and here in the room. But I think that eras of civilizations communicating with each other over incredible distances certainly goes back a very long way. I mean, people don't. You don't think about anybody in Bronze Age Greece being all the way up in England, and yet there is a before the Bronze Age, about 1,500 years before the Bronze Age, there is a Mycenae spear point that is found embedded into one of the stones at Stonehenge. If you were to travel to Stonehenge, it's like at eye level, and there is a Mycenaean. Now, Mycenae is the for the. I'm sure everyone's watched the movie Troy, when Hector goes out on his patio and he sees all the ships on the 10,000 ships on the horizon. Those are the Mycenaeans coming from Greece. Those people were at Stonehenge. So, there are these eras that we know of civilizations interacting with each other. But I just don't understand why archaeologists are not more enthusiastic about that reality, and that they want to dumb down people getting excited about it.
Yeah.
Well, even trading on like in our hemisphere, from South America to North America is something that they poo-pooed for a long time, and now they're open to it now. And it's just just on a common sense level, it's ridiculous to think people are curious, people wander, and trading was a thing. Being seafaring, I mean, we'll say seafaring. People made boats and got on the water.
Sure.
And I'm sure there was some just bold people. A lot of them died, but some people made it. I don't think that's just crazy. Now, the distance from Peru to Egypt, that's huge. That's freaking huge.
Massive,
but if it's on like the other side of South America, whatever civilization that would be hypothetically, going across the Atlantic to Africa, it's dangerous as hell, but it's a lot shorter distance. It's a lot shorter.
But it doesn't have to go from point A to point B. It could be you're trading with one civilization to another, and then that, if it's a hub of trade, then you may have another person that you trade to, and then they take it up.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. More than likely is you have a group of people who are skilled at traveling long distances and trading, and that's what they do. And so, it would be the same thing as far as we know, the Maya and the Aztecs knew each other, but we don't know that the Maya and the Aztecs directly knew Atahualpa, who is the emperor of the Inca. We don't know that Moctezuma, the emperor of the Aztec Empire, and Atahualpa, the emperor of the Inca Empire, actually knew each other. But they probably knew there's some big place, a 6-month walk that way. You know what I mean? They probably knew that. However, they certainly saw the artifacts come in because you have people who are professional traders, right? Coming back and forth. As far as the connection between South America and North America, I find that silly because all the way back 7,000 to 9,000 years ago, there's this period of people building these coral mounds. I'm sure you guys have heard of it.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And so this is from Louisiana all the way to Florida, down into the Caribbean, across all those little islands on the Caribbean, all the way down to Guyana in South America, and into Guyana. As you go through those swampy marshes, as you get into the granite outcropping mountains in the Amazon, all those marshes are filled with these huge shell mounds as well. So there's this shell mound civilization connecting South America, the Caribbean, and North America all the way back in this archaic pre-pottery time. And then for some reason, it just ends around, it's either 7,000 years ago or 7,000 BC. Probably, I would guess, is like a series of a couple hurricanes back to back just cuts off that civilization and destroys it all. and sets them back who knows how many thousands of years. But you know, it's interesting. There's all these little periods of civilizations that rise and then they fall, and it's just funny how, you know, I don't think that you're well, certainly not your average archaeologist is sitting around like wanting to withhold these things, but people who speak to an audience are certainly anything but enthusiastic to even appear like they find anything in their field of research interesting whatsoever. You know, it's like they hate their own field. It's very odd.
It's painful to talk about it and be excited in any way.
Yeah.
And that's
Probably
what
don't
they're
want people
losing,
taking their
Luke.
jobs
Yeah.
either.
That's what they're losing. You know, they wonder why they're losing attention to people like you and Graham Hancock and Ben from Uncharted X and the Snake Bros. Is because they're, well, for one, they're funny, and which helps a lot. There's some levity. This subject can get very serious.
Sure.
And they're also, you know, really great communicators, you know, and just regular folks. And that's how they connect. And instead of being talked at, you know, or even just read somebody staring down on a podium and reading a paper, you know,
I also think it's an open mind that you guys all have, the ability to look at evidence that, you know, might go against the status quo of what these people have been taught in their degrees. You know, it's like, whoa, this is not what we were taught, and you guys are able to go, well, what if it's true?
Yeah.
You're not saying it is true. That's the best part about it. You guys are going,
Yeah.
there's evidence here.
What's the possibility?
Why can't we look at this evidence?
whole field
it
should
shows
be,
something
what if it's true?
existed.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
you just respond to, well, this can't be true because of this, you know.
Right.
So yesterday, the Snake Bros and I, Brothers of the Serpent and I, we did a museum
Shout out.
tour, like
Yep.
how we met in San Antonio. We did a museum tour, and then myself and the guys, the Snake Bros, gave a presentation at this local brewery in San Antonio.
Cool.
And I had this epiphany yesterday or last night as I'm driving home, and I realized that we're in this sort of I don't want to be overly dramatic, but you know, we're in this sort of
Fine.
Do it.
we're in this sort of renaissance period of
Yes.
people rethinking through things. And it's interesting how, you know, you had these kind of rebellious swashbuckling guys like Flinders Petrie and Percy Fawcett, you know,
Mhm.
going out and exploring places, and some of these guys can be pretty controversial figures in their own time, but eventually they become, you know, legendary later, you know, a century later. And then, you know, now we're kind of in this time of the Empire Strikes Back, and you know, you have these institutions that just put out these publications that are like this cotton candy fluff nothing, and everybody's so scared to even show a little bit of enthusiasm. Like if you read archaeological literature from 100 years ago, it's so much more interesting than archaeological literature from today, because it's not combed through by a billion people. But now we're having independent people with the ability to educate themselves on a PhD level from their own home, going back and combing through things again. Now, these are not people who are ever going to be in charge of archaeological digs, just how, you know, the world is set up, but they can publicize and publish their own research, right? And so you have guys like myself and the Snakes, or Ben from Uncharted X, or, you know, a whole, you know, dozen other people combing through things and, you know, trying to educate themselves as well as they can by looking at things from a different point of view. And what's interesting is I think that, you know, this whole little branch of these people looking at the ancient world through a different lens began in the same way that archaeology actually began. It's all happening again, because the very first archaeologists were like the biggest pseudoscientists ever. You know, some of these people were freaking crazy in the early 1800s. And as it gets to Flinders Petrie, you get to these guys who are still very open-minded, but they're much more rigorous than the people living 50 years before them. And I think we're kind of at a point where, you know, I think that the Snake Bros are a great example of this. I think they're extremely rigorous, and I think they're very open-minded while also being very down to earth. And when you hear them talk, it is not confirmation bias. They are not telling you what they think you want to hear. They are telling you what they believe the truth is. And it's becoming more rigorous. This alternate community is becoming more rigorous now. And we're kind of getting to a point actually where the view of the pyramids is starting to change,
Mm.
and that it's not just so hard and fast, black and white. The entire structure of the pyramids is 12,000 years old, and that's all that was there, and everything else around it was built later. Well, there's a lot of evidence that, you know, the pyramids were capped off and finished in the 4th dynasty.
Mhm.
You know, and I feel very confident about that. And anybody who's intellectually honest and open-minded to listen to the data, you're going to be compelled to know that too. You know, when you look all around the Giza necropolis, all of those smaller 4th dynasty tombs. Now I'm going to say one thing in one hand, and I'm going to say something in the other that's going to immediately counter it. And I don't understand why. But you look at all of these mastabas. So like when you guys go to see the Great Pyramid one day, you're going to walk around the base of the pyramid, and there's going to be these giant buildings, these giant ancient buildings all the way around it. And they're pyramidal mastabas where they're kind of slanted in like this with a flat top. None of them have a point, but you can walk through some of these. And as you walk through, it's very obvious that it's a tomb, and there's a big sarcophagus inside of it. And along the walls are these hieroglyphs telling you who the person that was built in it was, and they tell you their name. And a lot of these people say, I was the chief vizier of Khufu. You know, they're built right around Khufu's pyramid. And then around Khafre's pyramid, or at the end of his causeway, you have these workers' cemeteries of people who say, I was the overseer of the gangs of Khafre. I was the overseer of this person. I was Khafre's cousin or his younger brother who was the overseer of this and that and the other. All of these people's relatives and all the people that worked under them are buried there. And yet, where's Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaura's sarcophagus? Well, it's probably the giant building that's standing right there. However, those giant buildings are built in layers. And as you sweep back through, some of the data that Flinders Petrie looked at, they have these superstructures on the insides of the pyramids. And you go to other pyramids, and you can see that the casing stones that were put on to flatten some of these pyramids are like we know at the Pyramid of Maidum, it was certainly an afterthought. It was originally a building that was added onto to make another building that was added onto to make another building. But the first thing that was there was actually this pit that was cut into the bedrock with this huge granite box down at the bottom. And so you look at these things, and we're starting to realize that, okay, maybe this is all capped off during the 4th dynasty, but there's really no telling how far back the original construction here goes. The Great Pyramids, they're built on these primordial mounds, these huge limestone outcroppings, and then a platform is put on top. And even Graham Hancock on in his debate against Flint Dibble, he says that he thinks that Khufu had a lot to do with the Great Pyramid, that he built most of it. But the reverence and the original platform that was built on top of that mound may go back to an unknown time during pre-dynastic history. I feel the same way about the Sphinx, and I say this at the end of my recent video, that there's no telling when that huge limestone outcropping was actually cut into either the form of a lion or the form of Khafre as it is today. But it would be this huge limestone outcropping. You got to think, look at the body, and then look at how, the head is not big compared to the body, but the head is actually massive in person. So all the rest of the rock that had to be there was absolutely gigantic. And it points directly due east, which is something that connects deeply with Egyptian psychology. Because, the sun, which they worship the sun, it rises in the east and it sets in the west, and they all bury themselves on the west side of the Nile, like from the north part of Egypt all the way down to the bottom. All the tombs are on the west side of the Nile.
Wait, let me ask real quick. So
yeah.
Perfect here. So the water erosion, that theory that it is way older, you're basically suggesting that the Sphinx could have still been built much later, right? But the foundation of this whole thing, who knows how old it is?
The clearing of the Sphinx pit, the water erosion is so unambiguously old. They say that Khufu's pyramid, Khafre's entire complex is built sometime around 2450 BC. In the old kingdom of Egypt, the age of the pyramid ends about 300 years after that. Now Egypt is starting to go through a drought at this point. From 3100 BC to 2100 BC, it is steadily increasing in its aridness. And it's suspected that one of the collapses of the Old Kingdom, of the age of the pyramids, whether or not, the Old Kingdom is really building the pyramids, doesn't mean that this age of the pyramids or this age of prosperity didn't exist, because Egyptians later on, they all say, it becomes a common saying, I miss the golden days of Senefru, who was a pharaoh during what we attribute to being the beginning of the age of the pyramids. So this was a golden age during Egypt's Old Kingdom. By 2100 BC, drought is one of the contributing factors to Egyptian civilization falling apart at this point. Well, the traditional chronology of Egypt places the construction of the Sphinx in its entirety to 300 years before that. And I just don't think that that's enough time, with very scarce rainfall as you're getting closer and closer to complete drought, for those kind of erosional markings to be there, when so many geologists say that has to be thousands of years of rainfall for something like that to happen. I think that a more likely answer, to say the least, would be that this Sphinx pit is cleared out. I mean, even in pre-dynastic times, you could even put it at 3,500 BC, 1,100 years earlier. This is all cleared out and it's being venerated. And then, possibly it was carved into the head of a Sphinx, or into the head of a lion, and then Khafre comes later on and carves his own head into it. I think maybe even in just those 1,000 years, this soft limestone maybe is eroded enough, but I don't know. That's probably stretching it too. This Sphinx pit could have been something that was unearthed as much as I think I kind of agree with Schoch's answer. His first idea when he first visited Egypt was that about 7,000 years ago, and that would place it like right at the beginning of the evidence for people in Egypt, of civilization starting to kick off. Like, we have a lot of evidence of people 7,000 years ago in Egypt, and that's kind of the hard part of looking for 12,000-year-old evidence in Egypt. Is, well, we have 12,000-year-old dead bodies from Egyptians, but they're not buried with things that are anywhere near as significant as what we see when we start getting closer to about 4,000 years ago. As we start getting closer to 5,000 years ago, or 5,500 years ago. So from 7,000 to 5,500 years ago, Egyptian civilization is getting started. By about 5,500 years ago, it's well underway. Like, pre-dynastic Egypt is happening at that point. So I think a hyper realistic date for the entire Sphinx being cleared out, maybe not carved, or maybe carved into something else, would be about 3,500 BC. I think that's an easy date to Going back further than that, one, we just don't have like the evidence for it, and the Ministry of Antiquities probably isn't going to go looking for the evidence for it. That's not they might be interested if they knew.
I think they found something under it. He drilled under, and then
yeah. Oh, I don't.
Nobody look anymore.
I don't doubt that there's something underneath it. It's solid. It's solid limestone bedrock like that. Giza is this huge mound of mostly really hard limestone, and I don't doubt that there are things under there. You can build tunnels and shafts and crypts under all of that, and the bedrock is strong enough to hold it up. So and the Egyptians did weird stuff like that. They had these little, they obviously had this intense fascination with these strange, dark, secretive places. So for them to come out and outright say, no, there is nothing under the Sphinx, I just find it highly unlikely. I mean, they seem like the exact civilization to do something like that and to put something important down there.
The saddest part about that is like not looking for stuff. I know they have limited resources and money. Yeah. I understand that, but that's where they stop the amateurs who could, like, hey, if I've got the resources and the time to go look for that stuff, let them, as long as they don't destroy anything, right?
Yeah.
And as our technology gets better, I mean, we've already seen examples of that. But I mean, to your point, environment, resources matter for development. Randall's talk about the cathedral building, right, in Europe, and how we had these insane that they can't repeat to this day. How they were making the windows and everything, and the way they were engineered. It just stopped, and it stopped because the weather went south and plagues started hitting, and it was probably the same thing. We all know that Egypt, 5,000 years ago, that whole area was not as arid. It was actually lush and had animals. So that was probably just the waning of that period, and it just kept going, and they just didn't have the manpower. They didn't have the food, and enough, whatever they paid people or the slaves or whatever they had. I could believe that. But Ben has talked about where he found that pottery. They have found that pottery in graves of pre-dynastic, and I can't remember the date, so you might know. Hard stone vases. I want to say in tombs that are, it's either 10,000 years ago, which would be 8,000 BC, or it's 10,000 BC. Yeah, it's somewhere around there.
Either one.
Yeah,
pick one. It's crazy.
Either way, it's very, very impressive.
Yes,
and so and so all this kind of leading back to my main point is that it's very interesting to see just over the last 10 years. I think at 17, I started really becoming obsessed with this, like looking into it every day, kind of obsessed. And so it's been 10 years now. I've seen a transition from, and I think it's a good thing for things to be more rigorous. Like, I think that people are starting to realize, okay, it's not just one singular globe spanning civilization, Atlantis, that we're all chasing after now. Like the Atlantis hype is still there, but I think people are starting to realize, there's lots of lost civilizations.
Yeah.
Now
right.
let's okay. So maybe what's happening in South America and across the Pacific, maybe that isn't connected to what's happening over in Africa and the Greeks talking about this lost Atlantean civilization that's interacting with this primordial city of Athens. But now we have two of these lost civilizations that we're looking at. And I think people are starting to become more obvious that, it's not all one thing, even though there are some similar mysteries here.
There's a good amount of similar things, though.
Sure, yeah. But maybe it's probably, I would say it's more likely that it is a disseminating of ideas throughout the world, if that makes sense.
Like the West,
that finds its way into different civilizations.
Yeah, that's where and that's why we have repeated patterns that in civilizations that are spread over not just thousands of miles, but thousands of years. When we were up at the Temple of the Sun, Michael pointed out this little diamond shape that's made out of squares that you see in North America, South America, India, Greece, China. You see a very similar shape, and that just could be something that's carried on through the age, but that just means that they were in some sort of communication.
Now what?
There's a link.
What is this? Yeah, I'd love to see this.
Do you have the link?
Let me see if I could find a good
I
photo
took a picture of it, but I
see.
can't access to it now. But it's like a diamond shape, right? It's made out of squares. And it's definitely something you've seen all over the world, in similar forms, not exact, right? And maybe it's just our baseline programming, and we just like this shape when we're primitives, and it's like, squares on top of squares, and that's how we figure things out. Sure, I could believe that, but to your point, I think that's kind of always been my theory on Atlantis, is that it was just never one thing. It was multiple civilizations over a long period of time that fell. Yeah. And we're talking about periods of time. We have as Americans, we have no freaking concept of time. Exactly. We've been around for 250 years in a couple of years. That's how long our country's been around. And we're talking about, Egypt. 1,000 years in Egypt is just a part of their civilization. We have no concept of something lasting that long.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's been said so many times, but we're. okay, how this is said all the time that we are so
There it
close.
is.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's on the
And we're only seeing like the left-hand side of it from the
Yeah, it's all
shadow. So,
eroded there too.
I've seen those in the Maya world. They're on those huge boulder temple facades in Saudi Arabia, out in the middle of the desert. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Those step patterns are absolutely everywhere. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sorry. I was going down. I was about to say something.
time. We're talking about time, the concept of time and civilization, and how long they have lasted. And 1,000 years to Egypt is part of their civilization.
Yeah,
There's great significance in the passage of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what Kamala told
There's
me.
great significance in the passage of time.
Unburdened.
Dude, I'm so glad we don't ever have to hear that.
Thank God.
That
Please.
cackling woman ever again.
Oh,
So anyway. So we were talking yesterday during my lecture about how I'm working on this hypothesis right now that's going to come out in a long video. I've got these few like hyper deep studies that I'm working on, and one of them is Alexandria, and this megalithic pyramid size construction actually returns during the city of Alexandria between 300 BC and 300 AD. This monumentality of architecture that we see at the Giza Plateau is back, and it existed in the city of Alexandria. Now, they didn't build anything out of limestone on the scale of the pyramids. However, the lighthouse of Alexandria was comprised entirely out of 65-ton red Aswan granite stones, and it was
insane,
built to the foot to be exactly the same height as the Great Pyramid. And so my hypothesis is that, the Greeks that were living there, and there's no question, I mean, this is not remote history when we're talking about Alexandria.
No.
Literature had been around for a long time, and we know we can basically follow in the footsteps of Alexander when he arrives on where Alexandria will be one day. And it was just a small fishing village. That's all that it was. There were just some Egyptians living on the outskirts of civilization that he met there and then decided to build his city there. So anyways, this monumental architecture is back. And I think that what the Greeks were trying to do is trying to convince the Egyptians that they could return the Egyptians to this monumental primordial age that must have set, deep in their subconscious, because Egypt had, it had fallen off in the last 800 years. It was really just a shell of itself.
Make Egypt great again.
Yeah, they wanted to make Egypt great again. And so this this Greek thirst for science and ingenuity mixed with Egyptian stonemasonry, I think that they were able to return Egypt back to this golden age. And it's a real shame that we don't see it anymore, because so many civilizations have built on top of Alexandria and completely paved it to the ground that none of the monuments exist anymore. There's a few there, and I took a bunch of photos of what was there. But I was talking to, I was giving this lecture, and this girl asked me, she goes, okay, so how far are we from Alexandria compared to how far they were from the pyramids? And it dawned on me that we're today closer to the founding of Alexandria than it was to the pyramids. Think about that. And that's just accepted known Egyptian civilization. And that's like really, really, really blows my mind. I think that as I have dived into studying ancient history more and more, I begin to further realize the significance of the passage of time. And I understand the depth more now of 1,000 years. And I'm kind of able to understand it. Like, okay, when you first come into studying ancient history, for a lot of us, it's Graham Hancock, Fingerprints of the Gods. And you hear him, he speculates a lot about, like, well, could there be this, ancient civilization existing back during the Ice Age? And that becomes really, really compelling. And there's still, to this day, there's a lot of evidence of things going back to the Ice Age that we can't explain. But as I became more obsessed with ancient history, I started going down more different rabbit holes. I started studying the Americas, which is, for a lot of it, is so much more recent history. We know exactly when Maya civilization begins. Or we know exactly when it reaches its height. There's really no question, because they have their own dating system, and we can translate it, and we know like they literally say their birthdays, like August 4th, 731 AD. You know what I mean? We can calculate that through their language. Anywho, and then you jump to Egyptian civilization. You start studying Egyptian civilization. You realize how big that study actually is. And then you look at pre-dynastic Egypt, even just, our kind of ceiling of studying Egypt. Once you get to about the pyramid age, quote unquote, the old kingdom, you start reaching our ceiling of what is actually concrete evidence at that point. Then you go back another 600 years beyond that. Now you're at 3100 BC, where they find the Narmer palette, who they think is the king from southern Egypt that unites Upper and Lower Egypt. That's incredibly remote history right there. And then before that, you have now entered into the time of people being buried with these incredibly precise hard stone granite vases. What the hell were those doing before Egyptian civilization had even really kicked off in 3100 BC? Then as you start creeping back 3200, 3300, you are literally in remote history. There's nothing known about what was going on then. I mean, even, you can't buy an entire book, an entire textbook that's this thick over pre-dynastic Egypt. There's not, pre-3100 BC, there's not enough evidence that's out there. I'm not, don't know if that's true. I'm just saying it as an analogy. There's not that much evidence out there. But the deeper you sink into it, the more of an appreciation you have for 3500 BC and how remote that is. And your perspective changes. And so now, thinking about Göbekli Tepe, I'm like, dude, 11,600 years ago, 11,600 years. We are closer to the unification of Egypt by a long shot than we are to that.
Right.
Man, that's just,
it's vast.
It's insane. I mean, the ancient history is so vast. Sorry, I just went down a whole rabbit hole there, but
no, that's why we love it.
It's the base of our show, is like the in awe of time and the significance passage of it,
Thanks, Kamala.
I do want to ask you about Guatemala. You kind of just
you
mentioned the mosquitoes, but what did you find down there?
Can you ride the mosquitoes there? Are they that big?
They got little saddles you can.
Okay, did you guys use bug spray when you were at Machu Picchu? I'm sure you did. Probably.
Yes.
Yeah. I always make the mistake of just not even considering the fact that I would probably like bug spray when I'm there. And those Amazonian mosquitoes destroyed my arms. I mean, I was still getting bumps on my hands and on my knuckles and my arms like weeks after I had left Peru. That's how bad it was. So Guatemala, I am used to the bugs that are there. As far as what I found there, so I led like a pretty standard tour for.
Did you show this already? Sorry.
No, not yet. No.
Okay, go on.
Oh yeah. So that's the library.
It's a mock-up of it. Yeah.
So that was composed entirely out of 65-ton red granite stones brought up from Aswan, which, they talk about how, the Sphinx temple is made out of these stones, and the King's Chamber is made out of these stones that are brought 700 or 500 miles. These are brought 700 miles. And undoubtedly, it was the Greek Egyptians that did this. And so, this ability to be able to do this returned just about 300 BC. And it lasted for about 600 years or so. And a gigantic tsunami that was brought about by an earthquake off of the island of Crete just completely destroyed the city in 365 AD. And it was so bad that the location of Alexander the Great's mausoleum, which his tomb existed underneath, was completely gone. Like they don't even know where the mausoleum was after that. Mm-hmm. So really, really interesting story. The city of Alexandria is, and just so sad that none of it really exists today. There's one little tiny place called Comeldika that I visited, and it was actually part of Alexandria's university campus. So Alexandria, the library that they had there, was connected to another building called the Museon. And connected to that were all of these huge lecture halls. And one of those big lecture halls, and basically what it is you have these long streets, and they eventually lead to these small 180-degree marble marble amphitheaters that would have had a circular roof over it. These huge marble or granite columns with this wooden circular domed roof over it. Just beautiful. One of those still exists, and I got to go see that. That was really cool. And I mean, I was standing just a couple hundred yards from where the library would have once been, and that was really, really cool. So, anyways, that's okay.
Alexandria. Mosquitoes.
So back in Guatemala, I went to probably the most impressive things that I saw were Tikal and a city called El Mirador. Now, Tikal is pretty interesting because it's the only time in the Maya world where they're building skyscrapers. And what's interesting is actually it is the epicenter of the greatest war of the Maya world. So you have these huge players in the Maya world. You have Tikal, which is at the center. North of them, you have the Snake Dynasty, which is Calakmul in the city called Zibanche. And then Tikal has a couple of allies, but to the west of them, you have the city of Palenque, which is where Pakal's tomb is. I'm sure you guys have seen Pakal's sarcophagus and all of that. It looks like he's in a spaceship, Yep. Now, all of the Maya world is being influenced by the greater presence in Mesoamerica, which is Teotihuacan, which is in Mexico City. That's the Temple of the Sun, the Temple of the Moon, and the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. These gigantic pyramids. That civilization is just bullying the Maya world and basically forcing them to assimilate and become a part of Teotihuacan civilization and pay tax to them. Half of the Maya world, so that's Tikal. So keep this up. So half of the Maya world gets pissed off and they are tired of the civilization that exists in ancient Mexico City from forcing them to adhere to their gods, to their way of life, pay them homage, pay them taxes. So they launched this huge war that goes on for centuries, and probably the most expensive war in all of ancient American history. And it actually causes the collapse. Of the Classic period. Now, on one of these stelas, which are, do you see at the bottom of that pyramid there? How you see those megalithic stones that are sticking up right there?
Yep.
Yeah. So not on those, and you can see all the other ones that are in front of this pyramid. So all of those are basically monuments that commemorate big events. It's kind of like a plaque, right? And so these are all monuments that commemorate big events. And if you read that, those stelae tell the story of this huge war throughout the Maya world. Now, and the place where you can read the most of it is at Tikal. Now, Tikal calls this war the Star Wars, and this is where Star Wars comes from, and that is why Yavin 4 is Tikal. So this city that you're looking at is Yavin 4 in Star Wars, and so visiting,
you can really see it here.
Yeah, visiting, the location of the real Star Wars was very, very cool. Now, just an hour and a half helicopters ride beyond the horizon of these mountains here is what I did my last 2 days in Guatemala. I took this really cool like miniature jungle helicopter out into the deep jungles.
Yeah, see, this is something I'm never ever going to do. So
you don't think so?
Sketchy.
No way.
You sketched out.
I'm good. No. Like I'll do the plane flight thing, but not like jungle helicopter.
Really, yeah.
Puddle jumpers and stuff. Yeah.
No.
Luke,
I've risked my life way too much. I don't want to tempt karma.
Yeah. Well, so I took this helicopter ride out into the jungles of Guatemala, and probably the most remote place that I have ever stood on 2 feet. And now the city of El Mirador, you guys might want to pull this up. It's it's El Mirador, and you could maybe even look up like recreation or illustration or something, because there's no good photos of it because the entire city is still covered up by the jungle. Like there's a landing pad and there's an archaeological camp, and that's basically it. But as you're arriving on the helicopter, the pilot points out and he goes, you see that right at 12 o'clock? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, that's El Mirador. which is the biggest pyramid in all of the Americas, even bigger than the Great Pyramid, even bigger than the Great Pyramid at Giza. But you can't, this one right here is bigger than the Great Pyramid at Giza. But you can't tell because what you're looking at is the top 10th of the whole pyramid. And actually, actually the bottom base of it. So what you're looking at right now, okay, do you see the little clearing at the bottom right of the pyramid?
Yeah, I can see
it. Okay, put that there. That is a tiny fraction of the whole pyramid. The pyramid is legitimately the size of a mountain, and they just created a mountain in the middle of this huge swamp. That's probably the top, I don't know, 6th of the pyramid, I would guess. And and if you zoom out, I mean, you can't even tell. It's just the pyramid just expands and expands and expands. Actually, the next section of the pyramid probably begins off screen, so it starts dropping down off screen. Yeah.
Okay.
So as you walk
crazy.
As you walk down that staircase, you would actually be.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So you see Ladanta. There you go. You see Ladanta. Look, compare it to Khufu. That's how big it is. Now, if you could,
it's insane, man. What the hell?
Yeah. It took forever to walk up this. It was so big that I had thought I was off of the pyramid. I had just been walking through the jungle for so long that I thought I was off of the pyramid until I found the next staircase. And I was like, wait, this is I've been walking for like 5 minutes I've been walking straight
just on one.
Yeah. And I thought that I had walked down from it, but no, I was still on it. And so that little, so you say Temple 4, that pyramid that you were showing at Tikal is about the same size as Temple 4. And so just imagine Ladanta. That's the actual size of it.
Ladanta, it's daunting.
Yeah, you could take the pyramid of Ladanta and just drop it on top of the city of Tikal and crush it. So that you see El Mirador, you see the little archway that's in the middle. It looks like the little doorway with you have a triadic pyramid. Yeah. So that triadic structure, those top 2 or 3 levels, that's what you're seeing from the sky.
Did you go there?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I climbed up to the top of it. That top pyramid, that one right there, that is actually Calakmul. The person who made this has not been to El Mirador, but that's okay.
Okay.
But
this is Ladanta on the right here.
Yes, it is. It's not actually that big compared to Giza. It's probably the Great Pyramid of Khufu is a little bit smaller than the whole structure of Ladanta. If it were actually that big, that would be pretty cool. But no, the one pyramid is not bigger than all of Giza combined.
Right.
No.
But the third diagram is more accurate. There you go. So that's the top couple sections, the top couple terraces. And that's how much the jungle covers things up.
Yep.
So imagine if you're going through the Amazon. How would you ever find an ancient city if a pyramid that's bigger than the pyramid of Khufu is turned into a hill in the jungle? When I was flying over on helicopter, it wasn't obvious that was a giant pyramid, and I thought that it was going to be, but it just wasn't, and it wasn't impressive from the sky. It was only impressive when I was walking on the ground and climbing up the pyramid, and my legs were hurting because of how much I had been walking over this pyramid.
Where did the helicopter land?
Yeah, you got dropped down.
There's a
like
little
a zip line
somewhere in here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a little clearing. Hey,
Dude.
what if I sent I don't know how much time it would take, but what if I emailed one of you guys like the video of the helicopter?
Yeah.
Can we put it on there? Maybe I can
do it now. We're kind of on a time schedule, but we have time to do that, and I could read super chats while you're doing that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
All right, let's do it.
I can't wait to watch these videos that you're going to put out, Luke.
This is going to be great,
super excited about these.
Yeah,
love the content.
Next time Luke, we're going to have to book you for like 4 hours next time, just so you know.
Okay,
sorry, I'm
just
on
keep coming back. Keep coming back.
It's been like 10 months since I've last been on. I feel neglected.
That's atrocious.
That needs to be.
I blame X-Ray Girl. It's X-Ray Girl's fault. So
we're blaming her.
X-Ray.
We'll have you on. Well, when you're not traveling, Mr. Travel Boy, we'll have you on as you're going to be gone all of January, but you'll still be here through December. You staying home through December?
No, I'm going.
No, see,
going back to Mexico.
Yeah. I'm doing another Olmec trip. So
Oh, sweet.
yeah, that was
Hell
awesome.
yeah.
Well, we'll get you on sooner than 10 months. That's
Yeah, I
a
know.
crime.
I need to have the clip of Anakin like, this is outrageous. Unfair.
I met a kid named Anakin at the con. Somebody named his kid Anakin.
Oh, that's
Wow.
well, that's better than one of my good friends. She's a labor nurse, and the first child born in the United States, she delivered that child in the year of 2021, and the child's name was Joe Biden.
Oh, poor kid.
No way.
Yeah. Hey, Garrett, I just sent you the video on.
All right.
Twitter.
Decky69 for $2 says, Luke, just watched you on Julian Dovey. Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
I'm Julian Dory. I'm headed. I'm
Dovey.
flying,
Thank you, X-Ray Girl.
yeah,
Dory.
I'm flying to New York tomorrow. I'm going back on Julian's podcast tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm just an idiot.
There we go. All right,
Whatever's
here's
up there.
the
Here we go.
helicopter footage. So that in the back is the Ladanta Pyramid.
That
And actually-
mound
that-
in the back there.
Yeah, that huge
That
one on the horizon.
imposing hump on
Yeah,
the horizon.
And there's actually one in between us and that as well. There's another.
Yeah, I see
pyramid
that.
there.
So you landed here and then had to trek all the way over there.
Yeah. So
Oh, you
it's
trekked through all
Lord.
that. Yeah, wow.
Yep. Yeah. So they cut this little bitty hole there, and everything that's built out there, the guys had to actually walk out there for like, I think it's maybe 2 weeks it takes to walk out there, or 6 days if you're really fast. And then they brought everything there by hand, all the machetes and the saws to be able to cut this out. And then they brought all the building materials in and excavation materials in from helicopter.
No.
So there's a trail.
There's a little
Yeah.
bit of one.
There's it's
Okay.
it's an
Mhm.
ancient road. It's the Maya road.
Oh, even
that-
cooler.
Yeah, so when you're at Tikal, there are these things called sock bays, and there are these sock bay is white road, and it's these white paved stone roads that go all over
I've seen you've posted photos of these actually before.
Mhm.
I've seen these.
Yeah, they're
from your
huge.
stuff.
They're huge highways, and so when you're at Tikal,
yeah.
you'll be walking by them, and some of them are turned into trails at tourist sites. But the guy, one of the local guys that we were with, he said if you walk on this trail and just keep going, you'll be in El Mirador in a few days. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, it's a sock bay. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. There's already roads here. We don't have to make any. They're already there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just got to clear them off.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. All right, here we
Cool.
go. Jose A. Taco for $1 says, Luke, if you can bring back one thing, if you could bring back one thing, would it be the Library of Alexandria or the Mesoamerica records that were burned? The Mayan Codex.
Hmm. Wow.
You got to choose one.
I know my answer.
One Mesoamerican stuff that's burned. We would probably learn more from the American texts. That would open up a huge blind spot in all of history. Pure fascination and romance, the Library of Alexandria. Absolutely. That's a really hard choice that I'm glad that I don't actually have to make. If you chose the Mesoamerican text,
Great question.
If you chose the Mesoamerican text, you would expand our understanding of the ancient world by at least 30 or 40%. If you
Maybe more.
If you brought back the Library of Alexandria, you would open up our understanding of the classical world in a way that probably can't be quantified. There was so much in that library that was either just neglected and turned to dust. They never kept copying the papyri, or was burned to the ground. I mean, that library wasn't just burned once; it was burned 5 times, and then it was destroyed by a tsunami, and that was the end of it. After that, so man, I bet you would expand our understanding of the classical world in a way that can't be quantified or couldn't even be estimated. So,
Andrew Matthews for £5 British pounds, proper money. Luke, why is there no ancient stonework in North America, but so much in Central and South America?
I don't know. There's a little bit. He's probably, what he's talking about is the woodland cultures and Mississippian cultures, because Chaco Canyon is stonework.
Yep.
Now we don't
Not
have
megalithic though.
Not megalithic though. There's not many megaliths in North America. When you're just talking about like the United States, the one that comes to mind is something called Judicula Rock, and it is this huge map of the Appalachian, of the small area of the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina. And the stone was brought from a quarry, like, I don't know, within 100 miles away, but it was brought a long distance away. Very interesting stone. And the Native Americans say that a one-eyed giant moved it like 10,000 years ago or something. Yeah, there you go. There's an old photo of an archaeologist standing behind it where they have where the color it's like colored in, and he highlighted some of the markings in yellow. You may be able to pull that up, and it's a little bit more obvious there. No, not that one. I don't think that's Judicula Rock, although I've never seen that before. That's really interesting. It looks like it's the same art style. There's a little gingerbread man on there too.
There is.
I see
there we go. There we go. That's it. So that's one of very few megaliths in North America. Now, just to answer the question, I'm not an expert in Mississippian cultures, but it might be. It's not that they weren't capable of doing it. They had to be capable of doing it because they had the same astronomy as so many other ancient cultures. So they were very intelligent people. Probably that it was easier just to make things out of earthen mounds because that's probably what was more prevalent in the ground. Like, the Maya, they really had no choice. They didn't just have all of this abundance of soft sand and mud around them. Literally the entire bedrock of the Maya world is this porous, like poor quality limestone. So they had to do something with it eventually. But in the woodland regions, all it is this really nice, soft, compact dirt. So you just, you build out of it what you can. But I think had you seen those ancient cities in ancient times, you wouldn't have been disappointed with how grand they were. I'm sure that they were very amazing ancient cities.
Curtis Hart for $1.99 says, Gary, you've been replaced by a clone. How would I know? Just saying. I can deny it all day, but then you wouldn't believe me. So I don't know. DJ for $10. This is a really cute, but it doesn't explain the lack of tech growth in South America. What kind of tech growth?
Like their technology stagnated? Is that what he's saying?
I don't know.
It doesn't speak of the lack of technology growth in South America. Well, maybe it was because they got cut off, or what kind of technology you're talking about. Because that's what Luke was talking about with the Mayan codex. And we have no understanding of like how their culture worked and what their tech was. If you want to talk about like the development of ayahuasca or terra preta,
Sure.
That's tech. That's pretty advanced tech.
Terra preta, one of the most remarkable inventions in mankind, a type of soil that is more fertile than what the earth naturally offers. How the hell is that possible to make something like that naturally? You're talking about high levels of technology there, and to do advanced astronomy in the middle of the jungle as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. I don't know. I mean, the lack of tech growth, man, it's just an onion with an infinite amount of layers. And, you just, the deeper and deeper you get, the more you realize that it's not possible to have a whole lot of confidence with like blanket statements, because there's just too much nuance to everything and too many, I can start going down this road and this path of thinking, but, there's one roadblock and one thing that doesn't make sense. Like what I was saying with the Great Pyramids. I go down so many rabbit holes. It's hard to keep my brain together. But what I was saying is, you have all these people buried around the Great Pyramids. Finally, I'm getting back to my point an hour and 50 minutes later. You have all these people buried around the Great Pyramids that are related to Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure. It would make sense that their tomb is in the pyramid that all these structures are built around. Why the hell, when you go inside the pyramid, does the pyramid not look like anything like all the other burials?
There's no hieroglyphics, nothing.
You mean to tell me the most powerful man in the world didn't decorate the inside of his tomb, even if no one was going to see it?
And the Osirian,
I don't understand.
There's nothing. There's no hieroglyphics there either. It looks it is very megalithic, and it looks very similar to other megalithics. Yeah, a lot of shit doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, for anyone interested in like getting into here, when you first approach it, you have this idea that you think it's going to be black and white, and you're going to be able to easily understand it. You're not. There's too much nuance. The onion is too dense. You can go down this whole rabbit hole, and yet at the end it doesn't make any sense. And then you go down the other rabbit hole, and at the end it doesn't make any sense. It's just the depth of time and all of the different possibilities is mind-boggling, and sifting through the evidence, trying to figure out what the truth is, takes many, many lifetimes to do.
Obscure artiste for $5. Everything is true. Aliens are living in the ocean, and I still have to clock in at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. And we had a fun little we had some fun coverage of the UFO hearings, and apparently there's another one next week that's supposed to be better, and we will be covering that.
We'll see about that.
Well, that's what Pope said. Nick Pope said that.
Oh, Nick.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about aliens?
Oh, they're real.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time.
We don't have enough time, but they're absolutely real. They're here. Now, aliens. Now we can go. That's a whole show. Like, what are they? What are they? Are they us from the future? Are they trans? That's
Transdimensional.
Transdimensional.
Are they what?
Beings?
Yeah. Are they transdimensional kids? Yeah. What? I have no idea.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Do they have a lot of parents in Hollywood? I don't know. Udite won for $10. Have you guys looked much at the oh my God, how am I supposed to say this? Kutuni Tripoli culture?
Maybe I'll read it. Let's see.
Here. I'll get you the word.
All right. I'm not sure what order it is in my
Cuteni.
Oh goodness. No,
should they be more famous? Oldest planned cities pre-Mesopotamia with
yes. These
ring structures like Atlantis, present day Ukraine, Romania, Moldavia.
Yeah. That's a big thing, is these ring-shaped cities, as well as stone circles like Stonehenge and all the different hinges. Like there's Nabta Playa, which is a 9,000-year-old site in Egypt that is a Stonehenge. I don't know if you guys have heard of this before, but there's a Stonehenge in Egypt that far predates, which that's another thing that goes against what I was saying. This is before, Nabta Playa in Egypt. This Stonehenge in Egypt is long before, 3,500 BC. Here's these ringed cities. So, I mean, this idea of these circular cities really stretches far back into antiquity. And that's why I think this story of Atlantis is probably an amalgamation of a lot of different things from the Greeks' understanding of ancient history ending up in a story. That's what I would guess. I would venture to say that Atlantis probably was not actually called Atlantis. It probably had a different name.
Yes.
And that the word Atlantis is just a placeholder for whatever
blanket term.
it really was. Yes, whatever it really was. And maybe it was even an era of cities and civilizations that they looked at as being more civilized, as being a higher society than they were. So I come at these things just kind of knowing that, ancient people's understanding of their ancient history is as fuzzy as our understanding of them is. And, you have to take things with a grain of salt, but know that they're not just pulling this out of their ass. Like the story of Troy, when you look aside from all the mythology of the Greek gods in there, the Trojan War really probably did happen. We have evidence at the actual city of Troy of the city being burned down right at the end of the Bronze Age, right when the Greeks told us that it happened. And so I would imagine that the story of Atlantis, one day, who knows how many centuries from now, they'll probably find a place that proves that a city like that was real in the same way they did with Troy. They used to think Troy didn't exist for a long time.
Okay. IV1011 for $4.99. Luke, do you keep a journal of your observations? If so, do you plan to publish your findings?
Well, I just have an insanely extensive and disorganized notes app on my phone with all my thoughts on it. If I were to publish, well, I publish my findings on YouTube, but if I were to, take all my notes together and publish that, how people will do that, like publish a diary. I'm probably a long, long way away from that. I've got many more years of traveling and looking into things for myself. That me going to Egypt is really just like the chips and queso of the rest of the meal, because
Right.
all that was a teaser for getting a feeling of where I'm going to be. And I plan to be in Egypt once or twice a year, every year for the following decades. And it's going to take that amount of time to really be able to study things and become an expert in certain facets that I find interesting, to come to conclusions that are worth publishing. Yeah. Maybe not decades, but years.
Red Android for $4.99. My mom can speak Cachical. Did I get that close? Fluently. I used to know how to speak it. Speaking of Mayans, I am half white and Mayan. Small world.
Cool.
Thunderstorm for $4.99. One-eyed giants refers to the red dot on their foreheads, like the Tartanians or the Etruscans.
Yeah. Tartarians and Etruscans.
Etruscans, Etruscans, whatever. I can't read.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe.
Ancient slug thrower for $5. Movies and comics have become so boring that geology and ancient history are now more interesting by comparison. You're right. Well, they used to
they were
borrow
always
a lot
interesting. They were always very interesting.
It was always interesting.
Yeah.
But,
what's funny is
I get you.
So I'm gearing up for Gladiator 2, and so my wife and I were watching Gladiator 1 earlier today. And she said the most 21st century thing to me. She goes, "This looks exactly like Game of Thrones." And I go, "This is Game of Thrones." Like, Game of Thrones is based on ancient history.
Actual history. Yeah. Lots of it. Oh, so is Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, exactly.
So. All right. I think that's it. We're going to wrap it up there because I have a hard out. I got to get home. Well,
cool.
The other home and then home.
And
Yeah, you know how it goes. So guys, thank you again, Luke. Adam, real quick, what do you got coming up?
Just my show, the Crigler show, down right there. You can check it out. I just trucking along. Actually positive. Hyped. Elon Musk just responded to one of my tweets, my posts.
Awesome.
That was very cool. Luke, I'm really hyped about your obviously perfect vocation and how it has expanded beyond the Americas, and I am just really hyped that I get to, talk to you and get to know you on a more personal level. Of you coming and joining us, I just every time you come on here, I love it. I love your stuff. I'm just very excited about the future that you're of your future. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. It's very flattering, and I'm very honored and lucky just to be here chatting with you guys and be interacting with the audience watching as well. I'm very, very lucky, fortunate, and feels surreal just to hear you say that.
Right on.
Quarter Black.
I have a channel, Nega Garrett. I'm dropping a video pretty soon. I went to Dallas. Nega, that's
Okay.
Nega Garrett on YouTube. I went to Dallas, one of the only counties in northern Texas that voted blue, to talk to people, and I got some interesting responses. So that's going to be a video coming out on that channel pretty soon. We're running towards 10K on the channel by the end of the year. That's what I'm trying. I'm going to try to get there. So.
Excellent.
And the same, I'm going to echo what Adam said. Love you, Luke. I'm glad that we're hanging out all the time. We get to hear your expeditions, and I'm excited for your channel. I love watching your videos, so can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, thank you, man. Also, my wife and I, we come up to the Dallas area during the holidays, so we should link up.
Absolutely. Let me know.
Yeah, thank you to the Nerdrotics. Thanks to everyone who left super chat and donation. Luke, I'm so proud of you. I'm glad to know you. It was great. You know, that one time we had dinner and we chit-chatted about like YouTube, and seeing you take the leap and quit the day job and go into this full time without having a net, having the balls to do that. And you're doing it. And again, I could not be prouder of you. You got a good future ahead of you. And
it really was you that got in my ass to do it. You know, I was constantly like telling Lauren, I was like, you know, Gary said it's not going to happen until I quit my job. I'm not going to get where I want to be until I quit my job. And I finally wore her down.
She's like, don't listen to that.
She's like, what does he know? Okay.
Yeah. So
no, she's cool.
Took
she's
the leap.
awesome.
Yeah, took the leap, and I'm looking forward to getting back in February, and when I can settle down and really, like, every single Friday there's going to be a new video for that entire year. Well, I mean, and foreseeable future after that. But I'm really looking forward to getting back from Egypt in February and getting into like the YouTube grind set at that point.
Excellent. And then we can have you on again in February. That'll be good. We can get you on in February. So that'll be sooner. So thanks again for being on, Luke. Love you, man. You're doing great work. Please subscribe to his channel if you haven't already. And we will see you next week. X-Ray Girl's in the background. She just got home. So she made it home safe, which is good. We'll see you next week, probably for UFO hearings. Until then, take it easy.
See ya.
Nerdrotic.com.
Welcome, travelers, to the fringes of reality, where the strange and mysterious meet, and the thin veil between fact and fiction is torn. Welcome to the Forbidden Frontier.